Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AfterBuzz TV studios. Ryan Malati here. We wanted to give you some of the latest Game of Thrones related news from the month. Jeremy Dan, to my left, has a story for us.
Well, there's an interesting nugget in USA Today that I picked mostly so I could say USA Today, which is always fun. But there's a little piece about the security around Game of Thrones and the links to which people are trying to go to see what's happening on the set, because that's really a show where if you just see a character on the set or see the armor that's being used on a set, you can really understand a lot about the show. And
Right.
so they talk about some of the scripts being kidnapped and held for ransom and things like that, the disappearing virtual scripts that the cast had a few days to memorize and then they disappeared. And it also links to an article from last week, which is an interview on HuffPost with David Nutter, who's one of the real prominent directors on the show, and he talks a lot about the secrecy amongst other things. So those are some good reads if you're interested about this essentially cottage industry of people trying to, hype up the show, learn about it, steal secrets, and publish those to the world.
That's very interesting. I know that if I see anything, it's a huge tell. I mean, we're all a bunch of geeks and nerds. When you see one piece of armor, we know which house carved that armor and who's wearing it, and why they're wearing it. We all look into it. We love to speculate, but Game of Thrones has definitely been cracking down on that stuff every sequential season.
Most definitely. I think there were, when they had the Battle of the Bastards, there were a lot of people taking pictures from afar of the different standards and flags, and they kind of knew the way a lot of that was going to factor out.
And as much as we want to know what happens, I think I commend HBO and the producers of Game of Thrones for trying their darndest to keep it a secret, because we really want to wait to open that present on, well, it feels like Christmas Eve, but we gotta wait till Christmas Day.
Some people obviously want to shake the package to figure out what's in it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We gotta wait till April for it. It's a very cool story. Thank you. Jeremy, for my segment, I wanted to talk about, since today's episode we talked about the writing of Game of Thrones, and the most important writer of them all, George R.R. Martin. He actually wrote a novella back in the 1980s called Nightlfyers, and we're going to show you that trailer. Here's a description from Entertainment Access on YouTube. This show is based on George R.R. Martin's novella and set in the future on the eve of Earth's destruction. A crew of explorers journey on the most advanced ship in the galaxy, the Nightlfyers, to intercept an alien spacecraft, one that might just hold the key to their survival. Enjoy this trailer.
This is a warning, not a distress call. Do not board this ship. Do not bring the Nightlfyers back to Earth.
Ooh.
Oh, we can narrate?
Yeah.
Nice. Scary.
Nightlfyers is a haunted house story on a starship. It's Psycho in space.
And to space we go. Great.
Nightlfyers is like nothing you've seen before.
It's
exciting stuff.
I can't wait to actually see it come alive on the screen.
This was an extremely ambitious set to build. It's acres of spaceship.
Should be epic.
They've been doing a lot of
To
epic
describe
sets.
the
Yeah.
series in 3 words, it would be just f***ing awesome.
Wow, oh my God. That's so cool. I wanted to, we didn't get really a chance to talk about this episode, but I wanted to talk about really what is the difference between sci-fi and fantasy, other than the obvious. But I think it is obvious now what the difference is. I mean, this is, I think you mentioned a moment ago before we hit record, Game of Thrones in space.
Well, that's The Expanse.
The Expanse.
Which was real,
On
a show
Sci-Fi.
I was watching over the last couple of years that was picked up via Amazon after it was canceled on Sci-Fi Network. A lot of people liken that to being Game of Thrones in space. And now we get to see, even though it's a little bit of a different genre, this horror genre and the haunted house in space, but we get to see the real Game of Thrones author doing his take on space. So that'll be really interesting.
There's a Variety article here in front of me. This was written by George R.R. Martin in 1980, and there was a 1987 film adaptation that followed, and Martin believes that it saved his life and career during a low point, and, quote, now that the story has been adapted for the small screen by Sci-Fi as well through Martin's contractual commitments to HBO, it precludes him from having any formal involvement in it, although he did write it, and he is involved.
Other than appearing in the trailer and
Yeah,
hyping it.
and like selling his name and stuff, but hey, it works. I love his work.
Maybe he can do cameos. I think that would be a good way to work him in.
He's almost like the new Stan Lee in a way, isn't he?
Yes, and we need a new Stan Lee.
I know, now
Although
we do.
we'll never have another Stan Lee.
R.I.P. indeed.
We could do it. I mean, that's a real shout out because that's some real stuff that just happened as well. And every show
Every
here
nerd
should be talking about that.
every show in the fantasy sci-fi world should give respects, and more respects are due for Stan Lee, and congrats to George R.R. Martin for keeping on. So yeah, I'm excited to see it. Nightlfyers and Game of Thrones coming back in April, guys. Thanks so much for being back here in the studio with us. I'm Ryan Malati.
And I'm Jeremy Dan.
And we'll see you next time here at AfterBuzz TV.